Hi, Sarah.
What's going on?
Everyone. Thanks for being here with a really good and lively conversation. So you started Conviction a little over 2 years ago, right? After a decade at Greylock. So what's the most unexpected thing that you have learned since starting your own fund?
I think that the biggest surprise has been just how short the memory of Silicon Valley is. Mm-hmm. And I mean this in a way where, like, as a new startup in the technology industry, like a software company, you can become relevant pretty quickly if you have a different product and a different point of view and a great team. And I think we are step one into that.
Okay.
But it felt like a big risk saying we're going to leave a platform and start from scratch. Mm-hmm. And I think just like in any market, you can go compete despite lots of incumbency. Got
it. And so your focus on AI native software 3.0 companies. Can you sort of explain to everybody, and to me actually, like, what does that mean to you in practice? What kind of traits, at least let's say, you look for that say this is an AI native software 3.0 company, or this is not?
Yeah, okay. So one of the premises that I had as to why like a new venture firm deserved to exist at all was that the conventional wisdom around what markets were interesting I think is less relevant in the age of AI. And I can give you some examples from the portfolio now. But some of the markets that have always been important in technology, cloud infrastructure, CRM, ERP, observability, security, like they will continue to be important. But there are companies in markets that like no self-respecting VC would have spent a lot of time in our portfolio today that are growing really, really rapidly. So example would be Harvey is in the legal assistance and automation space. If you were thinking about selling like software to law firms as a vertical for the last decade, like that wasn't a good place to be. You weren't going to get like a really fast-growing software company that way. Another company in our portfolio that's well past 50 million and growing quickly is a company called HeyGen, based in LA. They're in a market that did not exist before, which is people video creation, right? Like, what are they doing? They're giving the power of like video agencies and recording, talking heads to anyone for $1 a minute or so. And I think like, when we say AI native, one is you're just attacking like novel capabilities. And then two, the other trait we're looking for in these teams is like you're either advancing technical capability or you're assuming it happens and you're very ambitious about what you can build. And so it's really a statement about non-incrementalism.
Got it. So the market might seem like not one that obviously has a lot of growth opportunity in it, or
for traditional software.
Let's say it's really boring, but AI could potentially create really exciting, fast growth opportunities. I'm sure I would imagine that almost every founder you talk to now says that they're building an AI native product. Does it take a lot of investigation to say, is this company really have AI at their core, or are they sort of, let's say, AI washing a business that isn't really AI?
I'd hope we could tell pretty quickly. But I think it's the sort of easiest tell for us is just level of reasonable ambition, right? If you are taking the existing workflow and you're making some minor adjustments, making it 10% more efficient, actually the incumbents should do that, right? They have the customers, they have the surface area, and like they see this trend happening too. And so I think we're much more interested in companies that say like, we are going to replace a huge piece of work. We're going to rethink the CRM from the ground up. And like, actually, you don't need this database table anymore. That was the core view that you had to manage your customers before. We're just going to give you a new workflow because we know the incumbents will not do that.
I would imagine that a huge challenge, and maybe an underestimated challenge, is, okay, you've got this great technology. Clearly it's useful. And then there's this big step of like, can you get companies or individuals to actually implement it into their workflow, into their lives? And I certainly, as our AI editor, I see like amazing technological capabilities, but then a huge gap between people's ability to use it and to implement it into their lives. So tell me how you think about that when you say, okay, startup has this really cool technology that clearly could revolutionize or really improve X thing that that a customer might do, but then how are they going to actually get the customer to implement that? Tell me about how big of a challenge that is, and is it underestimated a lot?
I actually think that's like half the opportunity for startups. So, we're based in San Francisco and Silicon Valley near a bunch of the labs. It's like ground zero for like the changes happening. We all use AI every day. But I think we're going to have a 20-year plus ingestion period, even as the capabilities keep expanding. And maybe to make that more real, like I'm looking at, it's board meeting season, and I'm looking at the board decks for companies for this week and next week. And several of the companies at scale, they're like, we have a CS problem. Right? Customer success problem. Okay. We can sell this stuff and people are getting a ton of real value out of it, but the use of the tooling is actually very uneven amongst a user base in a large enterprise or amongst our most sophisticated users and our new users. Right. Because there's a learning curve for humans. Like we can only change so quickly, and I think this technology is changing really, really fast. And so for companies that figure out how to make onboarding and make like teaching use of tools part of their practice, I think is going to be a really big advantage. But it is going to take a while.
Do you think, is it critical to you that a startup knows how they're going to solve that problem? Or would you say, hey, if they have great technology, then we're going to invest in them and we're going to help them figure out how to do that?
I think it is critical because if you don't get it, all the way to end user value in enough of your customer base or with enough of your users that they stick, like it doesn't matter what the technology was.
Yeah.
It's their responsibility. Broadly
speaking, if you look at just like the investment in the frontier AI technology, if what you're saying is true, that we have like 20 years of hard implementation, given how fast we see the capabilities evolving, it would seem to me we might be saying the gap between what AI can do in the labs and what AI is doing in the world do you think this is going to keep getting bigger and bigger?
I think that's true. Yeah. And one of the core beliefs at the firm is I don't think this is going to happen, but even if no more research progress was going to be made, we could come up with nothing new and scaling laws were dead and there was no more way to generate new data and the models are just the models. Mm-hmm. In research or in many fields, you have this idea of exploit and explore. If we stopped exploring, I think we'd still have 20 years of exploitation of how to use these models in every nook and cranny of the world and get the user base to use them.
Wow. Yeah. That's be pretty amazing to see, given that we definitely are still exploring, right?
Yeah.
So on that note of scaling laws and so on, I mean, there's so many shifts seem to be happening with the way people think about AI just in the past few months, right? First there was, oh my God, scaling is hitting a wall. Then it was, holy crap, DeepSeek just got here, and clearly, China's coming and we can commoditize models. And then it was, oh no, it's all about reasoning. And that's all in the past 2.5 months. So how do you confidently invest in young companies when all these core assumptions about AI, at least from the outside, seem to be changing so rapidly?
Yeah, we talk about as a firm what is invariant all the time, and then we invest a lot of energy in making sure we understand the state of play all the time. Right? We think it's an advantage for us or for any investor to be able to make predictions for the short term with some conviction. Right? And then one of the things we look for in our entrepreneurs is does their view of capability and of the world of AI match ours for some period of time? Okay. And are they staying on top of it? Mm-hmm. Right? Scott Wu, who is the one of the founders and the CEO of Cognition, which is a AI coding, AI engineering company, he tells his team internally, depending on what is happening with capabilities, we should be willing to rewrite everything we have. Well, every 6 months, because it's about what you can do with the frontier capability, and I think that is going to be the thing that's most useful to customers.
So have any of either the trends I just mentioned or perhaps something about that I haven't mentioned in the past few months really made you change your view in a significant way about what AI can do and where it's going? Or maybe for one of your portfolio companies that they've had to make this kind of a shift?
I think that people are paying a lot of attention to DeepSeek because they largely for like geopolitical cultural reasons, right? Like, oh, there are indeed like people who understand AI in China as well. But also because it challenges several assumptions about the cost of training models at the frontier or very close to the frontier. And the commercial implications of that are like actually a big deal because it is still very expensive to do sophisticated things with AI today. And I think to some degree, even though costs has come down 80x over the last 18 months, depending on how you count, people are still limiting themselves, like people, startups, my audience are limiting themselves based on like, well, I only want to have like 100 calls to Anthropic or OpenAI or to the model I'm hosting because like it's too expensive, right, to deliver this task for the customer. I think now that you see that you can invest in efficiency with such dramatic gains, it is encouraging people to be more ambitious again about like, let's throw a lot of compute at the problem and let's do it well.
Right. Yeah. It's impressive. On the other side of it, I know you've invested, I know, in like Mistral, which is a foundation company. Does that exact trend you just discussed not cause anxiety about, well, who wants to be on the other side of that? If costs are falling so rapidly, there's very capable open source models, can you build a business around something that's clearly being commoditized and the capabilities of all the competitors are getting closer and closer?
Yeah, I think these models are not sort of smooth in their capabilities globally, right? So I think language and cultural knowledge, regional differences matter a great deal. And I think there is increasing expectation around regional champions as well. And so the ability for Europe to have an open source champion with a frontier quality model, I think will be desired. And there's a lot of industries, defense, government, anything financial, regulated, where having access to a frontier open source model from a trusted party, I think is going to be really important.
Interesting. All of the biggest frontier companies have a consumer brand. Some of them are clearly more successful than others. One, obviously, OpenAI and ChatGPT is dominant. From your perspective as an investor or just as an observer, is the consumer market open to be competitive, or is OpenAI won that, and the opportunities are clearly all on the enterprise side in one way or another?
Mm-hmm. I think the original story of ChatGPT as a low-key research preview that was just released and then like a wild phenomenon with consumers is actually super inspiring, right? If you have something that is different enough, you can indeed challenge Google, right? Without, despite all of the advantages of like partner locked in Apple distribution, et cetera, et cetera. And so like right now, ChatGPT is far and away the winner in that new consumer assistant space. I think what it would take for somebody to challenge them is like, again, very novel capability.
Novel capability, meaning you think somebody could come out with a capabilities that, OpenAI with its incredible resources wouldn't have, or the way they would present it to the consumer to use would just essentially be really novel, as opposed to the underlying capabilities of the model itself?
I think we're going to get into like semantics of what is the model, because there's base model, there's so there's pre-training, there's post-training, there is like the actual shape of the model, there's how you use test time compute. I think it is unlikely that you have a dominant consumer product that is durable, that is not doing something at the model layer.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I think you have to have core novel capability at the AI level. Yeah.
Got it. It is amazing, though, right, to think about that. Like, if you had thought a few years ago that a startup could have 70% of the consumer market when they're competing against Google, which has, is already on everybody's device in the world. Yeah. And it's kind of amazing that that is the case, and was the case, and remains the case, right? Which says certainly that the way people view AI is different than anybody would expect it, and that in consumers' mind, it's not at all associated with the incumbents, right? Yeah,
I mean, to be clear, like the dominant pattern of search is still Google, and these are different products for people, and like a lot of Google search is like product and navigational and news and things that that the assistant products don't serve as well. But there is overlap, and I agree with you. It's an inspiring story. It's totally wild, and it just says like people really want it.
Yeah. So there are the big model companies. There's some areas. They're going after enterprises. Some of them are coming out with very strong programming tools. So as someone who invests in companies that are trying to apply AI to specific domains, to what extent do you ever worry, oh my God, like Anthropic or OpenAI or Google could decide to get into this market at some point, and if they did, they would just have the capabilities to crush really fast. Is that a concern? Should it be a concern?
I think we expect like the labs to be economic actors, right? And I think the way that when we talk to them, the way they think about it is like a model is, I'm paraphrasing, but a model is a very expensive asset to produce. And so you should amortize that cost or across like whatever businesses you can, consumer, enterprise, API, et cetera. And you really do need to go get into those use cases to understand the limitations of the model and extend it, right? But these are also just organizations, right? And they're relatively small organizations by company standards, right? A couple thousand people. And so there are limits to what any company can do in terms of serving users. So we don't think they're the companies to own every use case. And we just try to make predictions about whether or not like what we're doing is on the path of their ASI effort.
Got it. Think about, yes, they're simultaneously have like a few core businesses and they're trying to develop cutting edge science like a research lab. Oh, and by the way, they're trying to raise a few $1 billion once or twice a year. That does take a lot of energy, right?
Yeah, it's a very complicated, ambitious business to run already. They won't get to everything. And we think that there are like $100 billion and $1 trillion businesses to be built on AI out of their scope. And so that's very exciting.
Makes sense. So just to give some recent examples from our own paper and others, right? OpenAI is raising money at a $300 billion valuation. Anthropic just raised at a little over 60. SSI, which has no products or revenue, is raising at $30 billion. Some people, they're obviously just like in the public markets, people thought DeepSeek might start denting valuations, and it clearly didn't, or didn't for more than like a day. I mean, do you think valuations in the AI industry overall, or maybe certain portions of the AI industry, are getting very out of whack, or do you think they will pretty much mostly be proven very rational?
I kind of think of it as a game of musical chairs, right? In like some of these markets are very, very large. We don't know how to size them yet, but like the personal assistant that intermediates the world's information and other people's agents, like that feels pretty valuable, right? That's gonna be a big business. Somebody's gonna win it. I think like serving different industries in terms of enterprise capability and being the model provider of choice, if it is not commoditized at the pure API level, I think that feels like a very big business, and there's just some division of markets here. But there's not room for like infinite number of $100 billion businesses in these markets, right? I think we will have winners. And so like, is some of the CapEx port toward model training a waste today? And are investors gonna lose money? Absolutely.
Gotcha. Yeah. But if you consider it if you bet on the right horse and it hits, it's going to be a massive payoff. Is that also a fair assumption?
Yeah.
Is it obvious that whoever gets to something that most of us agree is something like AGI, is it obvious that achieving that will immediately lead to economic success? Or do you think that's a whole separate calculus? Just because you had this incredible capable AI, does it not necessarily mean you're then going to have massive economic spoils?
Yeah, I really think it depends on what the competitive landscape looks like, right? If you are way out ahead of other labs and you can do a lot of economically valuable labor, digital labor, like that does feel valuable. I think the leadership of these companies tends to be like fuzzier about what the exact mechanism of action of like that delivery is today, which I think makes sense for like the point in time. If there's 5 entities that all have the same capability, then I think the surplus goes to the consumer or it goes to the enterprise if there's not a lot of integration cost.
Right, and certainly right now, it seems like nobody has a commanding lead for more than a few weeks, right? So do you think that's possible that changes, or do you think what we're now seeing is that, everybody who has the resources to do it, that the talent and the money is probably all going to be pretty competitive with each other for the foreseeable future?
I think it's really hard to predict, like, if somebody has a unique scientific thesis that they make a strong bet on that's going to get them out in front. But I I think there are a number of labs that have the talent. The talent seems pretty fluid. Technical secrets seem very hard to keep at this moment in time. And the capital markets are really deep to continue funding scaling efforts, right? And so for the foreseeable future, it's going to be very competitive. And over the last 18 months to 2 years, it's gotten more competitive, not less, right? So that is the trend.
Right, pretty amazing. Okay, so without naming any names, I'm curious, are there some things that you've seen in recent meetings with startups that you were at least considering investing in that really surprised you? You know, that you were like, wow, I never thought a company could come in with this and that amazed me, or they should know better. I can't believe that this, I'm seeing this.
Yeah. Maybe this will amuse you because you're just talking about the book you wrote and the importance of books. Sometimes people's worldviews just come through in the things that they're pitching. Like I had an entrepreneur suggest basically like an agent interaction company, and the opening line to the pitch was, "Books are dead, books are over." And I was like, hey man, like I just don't want your future. You got the wrong gal here, right? So there's some of that. Hard red flag, or just like, I'm not going to make it happen. In terms of things that were like exciting or just surprising, we just got these deep research products, right? Like research report generation, and they have some issues because it's hard to figure out which of the conclusions and the analyses you can trust. But it's a lot of work done automatically for you. So that's exciting. We've been meeting companies even just over the last week or two that are rapidly ramping in revenue and have users using them in all sorts of different domains, from marketing and research, consulting type companies that are essentially doing the same thing but slightly more specialized. And to your point before, if you get overrun by the labs, like I was actually quite surprised that customers were buying these reports because I was like, oh, well, deep research exists. But it kind of goes back to your point of, how many people have actually tried it?
Yes, right.
Yeah, right? And people really, like customers and end users, they want their problems solved all the way to the last mile, right? They want the formatting, they want the data sources to be correct, they want hallucination management. And so I think there's value in like covering that last mile for every vertical. Right.
So all the time people are like, oh, look at this new product from OpenAI, all this stuff over is dead.
It kind of looks like this. Yeah.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
All right, we have 45 seconds. I'm going to ask some lightning round questions, right? Give me very quick answers. What industries do you think will be most dramatically reshaped by AI in the next year or two?
Engineering and professional services.
Okay. What non-obvious skill is particularly valuable for founders?
The ability to make decisions quickly when you have incomplete information.
Okay. What about for investors?
Intellectual honesty.
Intellectual honesty, undervalued. Okay.
Don't get high on your own supply. You're wrong.
Can you name a startup that you passed on or didn't meet with that you wish you had invested in?
I have a lot of admiration for Parker Conrad at Rippling. We had a chance to do the Series A. I didn't manage to make the investment.
Very good. Okay. We are out of time. I hope this was interesting to everybody. It's interesting to me. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Ben.